Going on YouTube. I've been getting a lot of questions lately over on my TikTok about the Big 3 upgrade. Do I need it? What is it? What's the point? Is it worth it? So I figured I'd make a quick video going over the Big 3 upgrade and the benefits of it. So first we're going to start off over here on the bench and really break it down to its bare bones basics, what it is. And then I'm going to get you guys over on my car and show you a real world application of a Big 3/4/5. We'll get into all that. So we're over here at the test bench to answer the question, what is the Big 3 upgrade? Now, you guys that have been in car audio for a while, this is going to be common knowledge to you. But for those of you new to the hobby, the Big 3 is just a way to upgrade your vehicle's stock electrical system. So here on the bench we have, this is our engine ground. It's the closest thing to an engine I could find. We got a piston here. We've got our alternator, we've got our battery, we've got our amplifier, and we've got a little head unit here. So the Big 3 essentially is we're upgrading 3 different wires in our vehicle's stock electrical system. It's engine block to ground, alternator positive stud to battery positive stud, and negative stud to ground. So visualize here with me. We got our engine block. We got us a nice piece of 1/0 here, crimped, and we just bolt it down to our engine block, and we're going to run the other end of it down to the frame. Now, for the second part of the Big 3 upgrade, you would get you a nice piece of 1/0, put it on your alternator positive stud, and then you would run that to the positive terminal on your battery. And for the last part, you would take another piece of 1/0, go to the negative post of your battery, and then you would also run that to frame or ground or wherever your battery is grounded at from the factory. Just a nice, solid, paint-free, thick piece of metal. You'll be fine. And that's all there is to it, guys, as far as the Big 3 upgrade. I know it looks like there's a lot going on because my RCAs and stuff, but it's literally 3 wires. You know, crimp them, heat shrink them, bolt them down, you're good to go. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you know, some people call it the Big 4, the Big 5, and that just refers to other parts of the electrical system, like, say, a lot of people will call it the Big 4 when they also do the same thing to the alt case. They'll take a piece of wire, because the case of the alternator is the ground. So they'll bolt it down here and run this to the frame. So, you know, you have a nice, beefy positive and a nice beefy ground for your alternator. And that's the most crucial part of any electrical setup in your vehicles. All right, now that you guys have a pretty good understanding of what the Big 3 is, I'm going to take you guys over to my Santa Fe over here and show you guys a real world application of the Big 3 upgrade. So I know it looks like a confusing mess under here, and this isn't your typical battery, and actually it's not a battery at all. So I run lithium, so my electrical setup's a little bit different, but the Big 3 and the principles behind it are the same. So let's go start with the alternator. It's over there. So one of the reasons I showed you guys the Big 3 over on the bench was not only to, you know, simplify it down to the basics, but it's also because my vehicle doesn't make a really good candidate for explaining the Big 3, since my alternator is really stuffed down in there. But bear with me, I'm trying to get the shot. So right there, where those 2 pieces of wire are, that's the positive stud coming off my alternator, and I got 2 runs of 1/0 coming off of it, and they go up here into a fuse, and then they run back to my battery. They don't go to that at all, and I'll explain that here in just a second. So I have my 2 runs off of that, and then I also have, you probably won't be able to see it, that wire right there is coming off the alt case and going to ground. Both of those wires. Coming up here, I've got my engine block to ground. I also have another one down on the bottom that's a little difficult to see. But coming over to the battery situation, so as I mentioned a minute ago, this isn't a battery at all. It's a wooden box. It's what's known as a battery delete. So what I've done is I've taken some 4-gauge OFC, tapped into the factory harness where the positive wiring used to be, and then made 2 jump terminals. So this is my positive stud, that's my negative. And that just allows me to have spots if I wanted to add any aftermarket accessories under the hood, like some LEDs, a light bar, a horn, what have you, right? That just gives me that opportunity, and it helps keep the factory wiring intact and still usable. So let's actually go look at the real battery now. So coming back to the back here is where I have my battery mounted along with my amplifiers and most of my wiring. So if you remember from up front, we had those 2 wires coming off the alternator, going through the fuse, and then they run under the vehicle and run the full length of the vehicle, and then they come up here. These are my 2 positive runs from the alternator stud. I also have a fuse back here just to be safe, and then they run up and they go to the positive side of my C-Max lithium bank here. And just to break it down, these 2 wires right here are effectively the same as this wire right here coming off the positive stud and going to the positive terminal on the battery. My battery just looks a little bit different because it's a lithium bank instead of a standard 12 volt lead acid, but it's the same thing. So remember, positive stud, positive post is the same thing you're looking at right here. And then same thing with the negative post. My negative post is over here. It's this whole bar right here. And I have all my grounds for my amplifiers, as well as 2 dedicated grounds going to the frame down here. And give me just a sec, I'll crawl down there and show you. I have 1 ground coming out through this hole, and it's bolted to the frame. Oh, you guys can't see, the exhaust is in the way, but it's bolted down. And then I have another one on the other side, as well as, if I can find it, this black one runs up to the alternator case. So I have a ground straight from the case, ran all the way back to my battery. And then these 2 blue wires are the ones we were talking about a second ago. That's the positive run. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much all there is to it. This is a real world application of a Big 3. I know this is a lithium bank, but the same principles apply whether you're running a lead acid battery, AGM, whatever chemistry you choose to run for your system. The principles are still the same. The application is still all the same. You know, you want your engine block to ground, which I showed you guys up front. You want your alt positive stud to your battery positive stud, which are those 2 wires right there. And then you want your battery negative post to ground, which are those bottom 2, I do believe. Now that you guys know what it is and what it looks like, why would you do it? Why would you go through all the hassle of running all these wires and crimping everything and heat shrinking everything and installing all these fuses? Well, let me tell you, if you guys are trying to run a system in your car of anything substantial, I'd say anything over 500 watts to 1,000 watts, you're going to greatly benefit from doing a Big 3 upgrade. I've seen guys' voltage get a lot better from just doing the Big 3 upgrade alone. They'll still have their stock alternator, stock battery, and just doing a Big 3 will let them hold that voltage for just a little bit longer. And that can make a big difference, you know, if you're competing or something. But keep in mind, when they manufacture these cars, they don't anticipate us putting anything like this in there. They're built just for the average Joe to go to the grocery store, go to the bank, football games, maybe the occasional road trip. And they're great for that. But once, you know, us bass heads come along and want to put a 10,000 watt sound system in it, that's where we have to start upgrading stuff. Because most factory alternators are, what, 80 to 150 amps if you're lucky. And coming off of those alternators is usually a piece of like 8 gauge, 6 gauge, 4 gauge, something like that. Something pretty tiny. And then going to the battery is the same thing. Like, I'll try and get you guys down here. See the factory wiring. That's it right there. That pink colored wire. I mean, that's probably maybe a piece of 6 gauge, which is perfectly fine for running the vehicle's stock electronics. You know, the lights, the wipers, the factory radio, the windows. It's perfect for all that. Works great. But when you go trying to demand 10,000 watts of power through these tiny wires and that tiny alternator, it's really, really taxing on the electrical system, and it's really a bottleneck. You'd be surprised how much better your voltage will be just by doing the big 3 upgrade, just letting those electrons flow. Because as you can see, I've got 1/0 coming off the alternator going to the amplifiers here, and those are the factory inputs for these amplifiers, as with a lot of amplifiers. Anything usually over, I don't know, 2,000 watts RMS or so, they all have 1/0 inputs. And yeah, it's great if you use 1/0 and then you wire that to your battery and stuff. But if from your battery to your alternator is a piece of 8 gauge, that ain't going to do you no good. Matter of fact, I've seen those wires get really, really hot and burn up, or fuses start popping, because you're trying to pull more current than them teeny wires can flow through. So that's the whole principle behind the big 3s. You're upgrading these teeny wires to something bigger to allow the amperage pull from your system. That's all there is to the big 3 upgrade. Engine block to ground, alt positive to positive, battery post, negative battery post to ground. If you want to get a little more fancy like I did, that's fine. It's not ever going to hurt you to beef up your electrical system. It's really simple to do. As a matter of fact, a lot of car audio companies offer big 3 kits where the wire's already cut to length, it's crimped, it's heat shrink for you. It's literally plug and play. So there's really no downside to it. The big 3 is always, always, always going to be beneficial. Unless, and let me throw this disclaimer in here because inevitably someone's going to be in the comments being like, oh, the big 3 is not going to help if you're already drawing too much power. You got to upgrade your alternator. You got to upgrade your battery. You got to throw 10 batteries in there for. Listen, look. Yes, I get it. It's not going to help if you're already pulling way too much power than you can produce. All right. This vehicle here has got a 390 amp alternator. It's got a 180 amp hour CMAX bank. I'm only running on a good day 10,000 watts. I've got more than enough power on tap for what I'm doing. Which is why, obviously, I did the electrical upgrades I did. But yes, so if you're trying to run like a 5,000 watt system and you still got your factory alternator, your factory 80 amp alternator, and a little, 12 volt Everstart battery, big 3 is not going to do a whole lot for you. You have to upgrade it's kind of a domino effect. Electrical's kind of a domino effect. So, kind of be smart about it. Don't just think the big 3 is going to solve all your electrical problems, because it's not. It's gonna expose them if you're pulling too much power. So just keep that in mind. Guys, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you learned something. Maybe you've been around some shows or some meets or in the Facebook groups and you've heard the term big 3 tossed around. You weren't really sure what it was, and maybe this video cleared that up for you. So I'm going to get back to work on this thing. We got a lot to do before Ruckus, so catch you guys in the next one.